be here again, y'all. So Gary and I have been we're on tour together. This is our dog and pony show. It's the first time we've accidentally been color coordinated. Jeans, white shirt. How about that? I think it's special. That speaks to the special magic of this place, and this place is holy ground to me, man. So I'm just so honored to be here. It's been a few years since my first novel came out. I was working for a while on it, while a lot of things were going on, and I'll just be quick about that. I had, toward the end of writing this book, my second novel, Bloodline, I was working with my agent for a long time, sending it out to about everywhere. Cannot publish my first book with Gary. And the unanimous thing from all these places was that, one, we love it, and two, we cannot publish it. And I thought, okay, so they just don't publish books they like anymore. That's fine. That's just the way it's going. So I can accept that. At least they were honest. But I was also thinking, well, shit, that means I'm not going to publish it. And I wrote Gary. This was in about this past December, mid-December. And I wrote Gary an email. I said, hey, man, I'm a little worried. I don't think this book I've been working on for so long has a future at all. I just can't imagine anywhere that's going to do this book. I've bled for it. This is my Tennessee novel. It takes place right where I'm from, and it was like, it was an especially difficult project because I felt that much more that I had to do it right. This was my Tennessee novel. And I said, I don't know how this is going to work. I don't think it's going to happen. And Gary wrote back, separate email. If you've ever had the pleasure of emailing with Gary, there's a unique art to it. Separate email, subject line, I have, Lee, a weird idea, ... Body of the email, blank. So I gave it a day.
It was true.
Yeah, it was true. I gave it a day, and then I called him, and he told me about this thing called County Highway, and then there's this other thing that he was kind of suspiciously pushing around and testing out, this idea of starting his own imprint to publish fiction and kind of do what he had already done before. He said, let me see that novel. I sent it to him. He talked to me about it a lot. He never once said, I like it. All he said was, this dog hunts, which I learned meant he liked it. So it took me a while to kind of I knew what that meant. But so Gary started editing it. He sent the edits back to me. If you've ever had the pleasure of being edited by Gary, you know that he writes all over the manuscript by hand in green pen. Not only is the manuscript written up in his own green pen handwriting, but so are your nightmares during this time. And but they're really good nightmares because you know your book is getting better, and you're living in that special place where you can see the things in a book starting to come together and resonate. Gary, as an editor, has a true gift that is a rare thing. He actually edits, and he adds in those edits a sort of loose velocity across the page. I don't know how else to describe it, but he has this special ability to track events across huge numbers of pages and make sure that they just kind of feed into each other in a natural yet fast sort of way. He has a gift for voices and entering different voices and inhabiting them. That newspaper, County Highway, this latest issue, has a short story by Jim Shepard and the first chapter of this book, which I'll be reading from tonight. Gary edited both of those pieces. They're extremely different in style, in form, in voice. Gary does not have a sort of homogeneous, or he doesn't have an aesthetic that is homogenizing. He really is able to understand what a writer is good at and then he kind of becomes good at that and helps you continue that. It's an amazing ability, this sort of, this gift for attention and getting deeper into the ink than any sane person ever would. So we are in for a super amazing treat to have you with us tonight, man. We were in Nashville, was it last night? Dear God.
2 nights ago?
It was either a year ago or last night.
Night
It was not
before.
last night because we got into Oxford last night.
Night
It's all
before
blending
last.
together. We're basically a punk band at this point. It's a lot of fun. There are t-shirts for sale for the gas money. You know, buy one from Valens so we just to help us get out of your town. If not. I'm going to read a little bit from this first chapter, and then I am going to talk with Gary about the process of writing this book, editing this book, publishing it, where we're going from here, and we're happy to talk with y'all a little bit about it too. So if you have questions, ask them after I read. This is chapter 1 from Bloodline. The headwaters of this river come from forks leaking westward out of the Appalachians. They join in the foothills like estranged brothers and are then fed by countless and nameless tributaries dribbling from porous slabs of Kentucky limestone to form the Cumberland, which widens and deepens and continues snaking westward and twisting and falling through the rolling region and finally dropping down into Tennessee, where it spills through the concrete walls of the Cordell Hull Dam. The tailwaters bending around and meeting up with the Caney Fork, a cold north-flowing river, in the town of Carthage, the county seat of Smith County, near where the father now waits for what's his. Ain't much opportunity in this world for boys like you, he says. His youngest son is lying on the passenger side bucket seat beside him, wearing a grocery bag for a diaper, listening. They all slept here in the van last night beneath a line of hackberry trees. Now it's near dawn and the sky has the color of a bruise. Some kind of sticky insect shit lacquers the windshield. The side doors slid open to the woods and the father can see his wife standing out there, half vanished in the morning mist, showing the older brother where to take a piss. Careful, she says, not on the cattle fence, honey. We don't need no electric lemonade, the father calls. He's doing fine, she says. When the baby crunches up his face for a cry, the father says, you got your mama's sense of humor. You know that. Everything they own is packed into the van and bumper stickers cover the rear windows to keep folks from spying in. The father's shirt bears an image of the old battle flag peeking from his low-buttoned flannel. He turns the ignition to battery mode and the digital clock blinks 7 a.m. The gas gauge marks low, but that could be the incline they're parked at. He jogs the radio for some talk he can relate to, but this close to Nashville, it's all happy shit that isn't telling the truth. Everybody's singing zippity-doo-dah, oblivious to what surrounds them. Sawmill hadn't hired him yet. That's because he didn't have time to apply. He was selling used cars up in Lexington, where he was born and hardly raised, at an auction lot called Mega Motors, one afternoon. Was it just yesterday? His boss accused him of having memory problems, like leaving keys in car ignitions, not calling customers back, stuff like that. The father explained his condition had an official medical term, thank you very much. He was called far-memoried, kind of like far-sighted, but pertaining to memory. And one of the symptoms was that historical events, especially those of the heroic and violent variety, were constantly bumping up against his present day. So much so that it was difficult for him to hold on to the more recent things that didn't matter much anyway. This job, for example. The hell are you talking about? His boss said. Wait right there and I'll show you. The father walked back into the cinder block office, punched a code into the little safety deposit box, which opened on oiled hinges, and grabbed a zipped-up bank bag full of cash. He came out the front, waving it at his boss, and got into his van. daring the fucker to even think about getting the law involved. Every damn car in that damn lot was illegal to some degree. Fake titles, manipulated odometers. And the father knew this because he'd done much of the rigging himself on his boss's orders. While driving home, he counted the bills between his legs with the windows rolled up so the money wouldn't fly away. Didn't amount to much, but it was enough for leaving. When he got back to their place, a small unit on the county line with a dirt circle around a tree in the front yard from where the dog used to be tied up, he found his wife on the couch staring at a muted TV. He could smell she was stoned. The boys were sleeping on the floor. "Pack our shit," he said. He called around about who might be hiring and made some plans. That evening they abandoned their rental, drove west and hit 65 south. The hook moon reeled in the night as they followed the taillights down into Tennessee. They got off the interstate, followed some back roads, and he began listing his reasons for leaving, though she hadn't asked. He told her what his boss had told him, offered his thoughts on all that, and said his memory problem wasn't really a problem at all. Don't you think? She didn't answer because she didn't know where she stood on that. Sometimes it seemed his memory was slipping, and other times he recalled events from long before he was even born, so vividly that it seemed like he'd been right there to see them. The truth was, though, that facts weren't of much concern to him. If they didn't align with his mythical reality, they simply didn't exist. She knew the stories he told were ones he chose to justify his purpose and place in this steaming red corner of the country, so she kept quiet and let him ramble. "My far memory's a natural gift from God," he said. "That's what it is. I can see the past and it's here right now. God hath done made it so." She looked back to make sure the boys were still asleep. "Plus, I like the idea of living along the Cumberland," he said, "near Beasley's Bend. That was my family's escape route." His mother had told him the same story when he was little, though when he taught himself to read and did a little research, he discovered that his only traceable ancestral past on his father's side stretched in the opposite direction. Not down into Dixie, but up north on the border of New York and Canada, where those old people trap beavers for pelts. But even that wasn't the whole truth. According to his mother, his father was hardly his father, just a man who'd come down to Kentucky to paint barn exteriors, and once the work dried up, found himself stuck. One evening while getting supper at the gas station, he met a woman who needed a ride. When he asked where she was going, she said, "Anywhere." So he took her back to his shack, and that's where she gave birth to Winston. On the pull-out sofa only 5 months later, the father ignored the math, pretending the baby was his, but the mother liked to remind little Winston of the mystery. He had a daddy someplace else whose past was glorious. Growing up, he had no bathroom, not even an outhouse, just piles of empty paint cans everywhere, which the family used to take their crap out of the house and down into the creek. Once he got old enough to understand this wasn't what paint cans were made for, he asked his father about it, and when the old man didn't answer, his mother told him that his line ran deeper than beaver trappers and paint cans, that he was of valorously noble blood, that his real father was somewhere else entirely, that if history had turned out different, nobody would be shitting in paint cans, and they'd be living the good life, right where they belonged, back on the land his real daddy's people had escaped from. His mother took him to read about their history on a plaque at the base of an equestrian statue on the courthouse lawn of Cheapside Park in historic downtown Lexington, where he ran a forefinger over the stamped bronze letters, and above those words the old colonel, John Hunt Morgan, straight-backed, arms at his sides, was mounted atop his horse, Black Bess, from a legendary line of bluegrass saddle stock. "That's who we're from," she told him. They often returned to visit the monument, and he was just old enough, 9 or 10, for these trips to shape his romantic sense of history and heroism and who he was. Later, his autodidactic research provided no hint of his mother's claim to this lineage, but he needed it to be true so badly, felt it in his bones so deeply that he decided it couldn't be false, had to be correct. And just like that, he began believing he really did have blood in the game. After visiting the statue, in bed he could hear the hooves pounding down the street like the tapping fingers of some impatient god. Still can. Last night during the ride-in, his wife stared out her window at the moon while he told her yet again of that one Civil War battle, more alive in his mind than their wedding day. It was one of his jukebox numbers. But when she realized what was actually happening right now, she turned to him and said they couldn't do this, that they had to turn around and get back home to Kentucky. But he kept driving, slowly so as not to waste gas, straight down into the town of Lebanon, Tennessee. As the family rolled past the statue and through the little town square with the monument to General Hatton, and left the village limits and followed Carthage Highway to Old Rome Pike, he pointed out the places where blood had been shed and land had been stolen. The road dipped and swerved along the Cumberland River. And when he finally pulled them into an empty lot with a chain-link gate, somewhere in a derelict hamlet called Rome, he cut their engine and told his wife to quit worrying. Breathe in that good air, he said. We're home. That was last night. Now it's morning and he's just waiting around in the van, ready to talk to somebody about working for the mill here. He can't see the river from where he parked, but he can't miss its warm vegetal scent. It's right down there past the sawmill. Its banks with soil so rich you could grow just about anything in it. Gentle rolling land, open for the taking. The birds are hushing and the fog's clearing. The gate to the sawmill's entrance is chained shut with a sign hanging from it. No walk-in applications and no unsolicited employment. But he'll stick around and give them a chance to clarify themselves. Once they talk to him, they won't be able to say no. Nobody ever did. Too much damn charm. The baby's gumming his fingers like little root vegetables, and the father says, I got a story for you. May 5th, 1862. Raining. Early morning. Oh, God, the mother says, this again? She helps the brother back into the van and covers his ears. I don't want him hearing about it. She opens the styrofoam cooler, slushes ice around, and hands the brother a juice barrel. Plus, May 5th's my birthday, remember? And a fake holiday to boot, the father says. Cinco de something. I want lemon cake with buttercream frosting, she tells him. Blue cursive letters spelling my name, not my age, just my name. On the real one I'm talking about, the Kentucky Cavalry was holed up over in Lebanon under the orders of John Hunt Morgan. There's a name for you, almost a whole sentence in its own, isn't it? She turns to the older brother, like I've been teaching you, subject, verb, object. He's too young for that school crap, the father says, but old enough for your fucked up stories? It's called heritage, he says. Anyhow, he's gonna be a hands-on kind of guy. Like his daddy is, ain't that right? The brother nods, drinking his juice. He knows words but doesn't use them much, not since they got him on the hyperactivity medicine. The father's eyes go gray as he traces an invisible map in front of him and starts telling how pickets were set along the roads going into town, the very roads they drove last night, and how 800 men were camped on the grounds of Cumberland College and all over the public square. Meanwhile, the Union general, Ebenezer Dumont, was leading his troops along Murfreesboro Pike, where waiting for them was a schoolboy keeping dry beneath a cedar. And when he saw the column of Union cavalry coming up the road, he jumped on his horse and got out in front of them and started shouting about the Yankees coming. And then, the father says, turning to the baby, they shot him dead as bacon. He gets so lost in describing the ensuing battle that he doesn't notice a woman has just unlocked the gate and is coming across the gravel toward their van. She takes her time approaching. Her hair's pulled into a loose braid with strands around her ears the color of fishing line. She taps on his door. "Who the hell?" the father says. "My name's Miss Becca. Can I help you?" "Well, I don't know," he says. "Can you?" Thank you. Wow, reading that next to Gary, it's always a little terrifying. What is that, vodka?
Maybe.
We're good, it's water. Hey, so that's the first part of this first chapter. I've talked a little bit before I read that, Gary, about kind of what you do on the page and how you approach a page. Do you want to just give some of your kind of general ideas about editing? What are you looking for? And say there's 10 manuscripts in front of you and you got to pick one. What are you looking for? Is there a specific thing you are keeping an eye out for? What's up with that? And then how do you start to work with it once you've chosen it? But how do you choose a piece first?
Well, I went to the Swanee conference for a couple of decades, and at the end, all these writers who'd done everything right. They'd worked hard. They'd gone to things like the Swanee Writers Conference. They had published in little magazines and all the rest of it. And then they all wanted to know what I was looking for. And I said, the only thing I'm looking for is something I don't know I'm looking for. I can't make up I have no ideas what fiction is. I couldn't write it, but I can read it. And if I keep turning the pages instead of after 15 or 20 just saying, this dog won't hunt, I try the next one. And you keep looking. I mean, the odds are pretty slender of the hundreds of books I would be submitted that I'd like more than a few. Because, I mean, if I don't like it, I have no business getting involved, because if you don't love the book you're editing, you're a terrible editor. You have to understand and trust what the writer is doing, and just each writer sets his or her own standard, and I'm looking for where those standards aren't met, and I'm absorbing, as Lee suggested, you get into kind of a trance where you're thinking like he's thinking, and you're thinking in his rhythm, and it's wonderful. It's total concentration, which I always appreciate, because everybody's got too much shit going on all the time at once, and you say, oh my God, I'm going crazy. And I always say 5 pages an hour is the pace I go through, and I've come to figure out that was probably a lie. It's more like 3 pages an hour, so that editing most books is pretty much a month. I mean, you have to do other things. You have to eat, sleep, do your job otherwise, and it's wonderful. And it's kind of taxing, and it's like being in training for a championship fight, but there's no violence. And while I'm going through it, I'm also understanding the book better than anybody else, because I know it down to the DNA. And I have to know it better than anybody else, because I have to sell it to, I don't know, 50 people more, 100 in the company, because we publish a lot of books. Nobody's going to read all of them, so I want them to read all of mine. And it helps if you know what you're talking about. I think people can kind of tell this isn't bullshit. I mean, at least he really believes it. And so then, you know, the author gets a chance to, you know, see a lot of green ink and look at stuff. And I just sort of say, with people I'd never worked with before, they say, well, what am I supposed to do with this? I said, I'd like it if you look at all this stuff, the things I'm not changing. I don't change books, I edit the fucking things, and I suggest things, you know, and I try to do it in kind of the manner of the writer. The ideal scenario for me is the writer will say, yeah, what I wrote there wasn't so hot, but what he's suggesting isn't so hot, but I can fix it better. And then the author will fix it better than the editor can. And the thing about all these, you know, comment, writing a novel, I think, without exaggeration, involves like 1,000,000 decisions. Period here, comma there, paragraph here, blah, blah, blah. Nobody makes 1,000,000 decisions correctly. And a great writer might get 80%. I'm looking for the 20. Anything that weakens the whole effect. And I haven't had many people not appreciate somebody reading like a kind of a lunatic and reading closely. And then I hand those things over and I never look to see what the writer's done by way of revision. It's his book, her book, not my book. And I'm moving on to the next book I'm editing, so I'm about to turn into somebody different. And you know, I never had time really until the last couple of years to read books that I'd published maybe, I don't know, 35 years ago. And I sneak a few in there from time to time, and I'm always happy. I say, that book's pretty good. But that's kind of the extent of it, I think.
This tour started up in Boston. We were driving down kind of along the East Coast, up in that region. Gary's pointing out signs, telling stories about this area, and going through Connecticut maybe. He starts telling really hilarious stories about Joy Williams and Rust Hills and those moments. Then we're getting down into DC, and then we drive from DC through the Shenandoah Valley, and then we're going through Knoxville, and he's still telling stories, he's still pointing. He hasn't stopped. There's a landscape there. He knew somebody that lived over there. He probably worked with him once, edited a story for him. It was okay. Then we get through Knoxville into Oak Ridge, and he starts talking about this guy who's, you know, named Cormac, and how he was working, starts telling stories about working as a trash collector, and how Gary helped get certain, not only on the editorial front, but just like how he was a part of their lives during these periods of them being writers. And I have experienced that same thing that all those people from Connecticut to Oak Ridge, Tennessee experienced, which was like somebody who cares about what you're doing. And Gary has been not only a brilliant editor, but like a champion of people's careers and their lives. And I'm just so thankful to be working with him and doing this because we're doing this all in the car. And that's a lot of story time, let me tell you. And I've learned a lot. And the stories are flowing, and I hope they never stop. Yeah, so let's take some questions from the audience. I think that's often a good way to kind of riff and not fall into our regular routine. Because if you let us do that, we'll bring out the talking chicken real soon. Any questions for Gary or me about this book, about Panamerica? One quick thing so I don't forget it. That story I told about reaching out to him, that was in December. That's like half a year ago. They got an imprint together. They edited it. They designed the type for it. You know, it's just truly amazing. These are really hard-working people, and they must have set some sort of record for getting a book out and an imprint out. And I'm just so proud of them and completely humbled and slightly shocked that they chose this book for their first book. But it does feel right. It feels like this is the right place for it. And as difficult as it was and uncertain, like this is the right spot. This is it. So thank
Yeah.
you. Anyway, so yeah, any questions?
There was a gentleman.
What was it about this book that made so many publishers who enjoyed it feel that it was unpublishable, at least for them? I mean, did they tell you this is our concern, this is our issue with it, it's got too much violence or not enough comedy? I mean, was there?
There's not a. No. There was never anything specific like that. There were a few times I think it was more patronizing than that. The 3 C's, the current cultural climate, that if anybody thinks they know what that is in regards to what a book should be, they're wrong. As Gary says, we don't know what readers want to read. And so, I don't know. I think publishing is in a weird place right now. And, everything is, not everything. I think small indie places are really fighting the good fight. But the major houses have become more and more corporate. And I'm really not smart enough or involved enough to know what the answer is, but it seems like what Gary does is he has a vision and he kind of believes in it so much that he creates culture. Whereas this kind of corporate, algorithmic sort of reading of trying to understand what's out there and bow to that. I don't know. Maybe that's, I don't know. But no, there was no real if somebody had given me an honest I'll take credit. I'm very much open to criticism as a writer and happy to help make a book better and to its best possible place I can get it. So that was the kind of the mystery. It was hard to read. There were people at Knopf, many editors who did want it, but they got stalled out and couldn't go forward with it.
Because it wasn't what they were looking for. But they couldn't know what they're looking for because they can barely find their ass with both hands. And the corporate way of thinking involves fiction because you do these, business plans, these forecasts, these annual budgets, and so on and so forth. And they most often turn out to be pretty fictional. And still they kind of press on. So in the course of all this stuff, and the bigger the corporation, the more expensive it is, the more money it can lose. And in desperation, a lot of places, they all want to buy bestsellers. Now, if a book has the elements of a bestseller, a lot of people, they submit to kind of commercial-oriented publishers, and if they get 3 or 4 of them saying, God damn, this is going to be a big bestseller. Well, there's a bidding auction, and somebody will end up paying an amount of money that will never be recouped, and it won't even be close. That doesn't make money, but at least it was done in a good cause, a callous hope of fleecing a lot of readers with stuff that serious readers wouldn't want to read in the first place. There's a lot of pressure on them, which is too bad, but it's tough luck. That's where they are. And the current climate is kind of befouled. I mean, I think every single publisher, short of, I hope they don't do it at Norton, but or small, smaller publishers, big publishers, they have a sensitivity reading. I think they have these things for cookbooks. They don't want anything in the book to offend any person in any way, shape, or form. That's another tall order. I mean, I don't think anything can be written without either boring somebody to death or ticking them off. But that's not editing. It's worse than it's in a feeble chicken shit way. It's censorship. Writers want to know what they want to write, and they get to write what they want to write. That's the principle. And I was shocked when I hear writer friends saying, well, we got through the copy editing and everything, but it's now getting its sensitivity reading. And I said, well, who the hell is reading it? Who is this person? Are they good about offense situations? Beats me. I think some writers would, well, I know some people who would, they don't even say thank you very much, so they just say no thanks. But it's a bad attitude. I mean, this is a cooperative enterprise. I am the author's, the author's kind of coach or principal or something inside the company, and I'm looking after the author's interest. And the author's interest, nobody's sort of saying, geez, could we get somebody to give this book a sensitivity reading? You would never hear a writer say that. So, bigness, and I felt this when I came into the business, I don't know, 50 years ago. It was too, it was then, families still owned publishing company. Then independently owned publishers would go together. Knopf would merge with Random House and so on and so forth. But they were just kind of moving in that direction, and then within 10 years everything had quadrupled in terms of pushing everything together. And I said, this is not going to bode well. And I'd like to think it's come to the point where it's got so big it will just collapse and break apart into sort of small units that can actually be managed better. But it's not an easy time. I hope it's a brief time, because it doesn't contribute to the notion of great books. It's not even thinking about that. And that's what, as readers, I mean, we all want to read great books. And anything to impede that, I can't approve of. So, I like this operation. I didn't think, when we were talking about when were we going to get finished books, copies of Lee's book, say this was in March, I don't think we had close to the jacket design done. And the interior type, Lee mentioned, this isn't a named typeface. This is created for this book. It's not out of the thousands of typefaces you just pick out of a catalog. And I said, well, that's got to add to it. And they said, well, we're going to have books by middle of June. In 2 months from now, 3 months. And I said, there's one chance in about 1 trillion that that's going to happen. They missed by 2 weeks, but it did happen. And I'm totally stunned, because it proves that you can actually publish a book with all due care in a much faster fashion than in a big company. And that's fun. It's exciting. I mean, it's sort of like get it done and do it right, and you don't have to sort of wait between the different stages. And so I'm a disbeliever who can't believe he's a believer, but I am, because the proof is right there.
Any question about the book?
Lee, could you tell us a little bit more just about the book itself, about Bloodline, the story, and just a little bit more about the history?
Absolutely. So, takes place east of Nashville, which is where I am from, along the Cumberland River, around Lebanon, Tennessee. And it's a story of this man, Winston, and his kind of his kind of wild search for mythology and delusion and power. He ends up acquiring the mill that he just arrived. This chapter I just read to you. He ends up acquiring this mill through kind of some self-harming, violent means, and thus begins a sort of set of mendacious transformations. Not only does he turn this mill into a kind of auction barn, where he takes on this persona of a kind of auctioneer, and speaking through the bullhorn, not only at the auctions, but it fits him so well that he begins talking inside to his wife with the bullhorn. All while he's lost a hand, he wears an oversized rubber prosthetic. There's an old
bullhorn.
He's speaking through the bullhorn. He, along with this land that he acquires, is an old ferry that has kind of some Confederate lore around it. A few of those generals take on kind of power in his imagination, and he fixes up this old ferry with some good old boys, and he takes his show on the river, and he becomes a sort of radio river pirate, speaking his mind about the past and the future and whatever the hell he wants to talk about and sell to you. And it's a wildly fun book, but he is a dangerous man, and whose sons want to escape his sort of legacy and gravitational pull.
There's no parallel to the existing timeline that we're in, is that correct?
None.
Yes, that's what I thought.
It's a funny. I mean, yeah, there are no names mentioned. I think that it's a book that I only could have written during the past 10 years, but it's also a book. I think that in many ways, there are books that I think resonate as much with our present situation as like this one does. I'm reading All the King's Men right now. I'm just, the absurdity of demagoguery and the dangers of it too. That's a pretty fascinating thing for me. And while the message might be dangerous, I'm really in love with the music of it. And so, yeah. Right. There are some, I think one could find even more like immediate connections between our timely predicament, but I'm going for something that as well may be timeless. That's what I'm shooting for. But you're right. I'm glad you caught that. I don't think it's.
I mean, Lee's a friend. I know that he's working, and he worked a long, long time ago. So this isn't current events. And much of the kind of quote-unquote political aspects of it, they were there before we're having this curious political episode ourselves. They kind of...
Somewhere.
Yeah. And it's coincidental, but it grows out of the current situation of the nation, of the state of the nation. And I mean, one thing that it took me a while to figure out, I knew it all along, but I just couldn't put my finger on it. If there's no humor in a book, if it doesn't ever make me laugh, I got no interest in it. I mean, it's something, it's an ingredient you can't get around, and this is a hilarious book. Some of the hilarity is this preposterous, blustering fool, because he is funny, and what's funny is the relationship he has with other people because of that. I mean, so the humor is great, and the looming threat is also great. Those are two good things for it. It doesn't bore you.
There's another looming problem in this book, and it's Miss Becca, who shows up right at the end of this piece I just read. she is the heart of this book, but she is also someone who kind of transforms through her counterbalance of Winston into sort of, in a weird way, what he is. And he drives her over the edge. And that's when the real danger begins, is her letting him do that. And then there's a question, is it possible to let someone not do that if they've taken your livelihood and just placed you in that way, in that kind of way? So it's a lot of Winston and Miss Becca and how those two currents mix and play out together and transform each other. These two characters transform greatly by the end of this book. And I just wanted to see where someone like Miss Becca, who I really love, and how she deals with that and what she becomes at the end. That's the real question for me.
I mean, Miss Becca's the end of her bloodline. Her antagonist is trying to invent a bloodline because he didn't have one, except just a loser. And so we got two different bloodlines we're talking about, and she's a fabulous character. There's this unbelievable scenes with her, and great nature writing. I mean, she appreciates nature and the rivers that they're surrounded by. I love that part of the book.
My first novel, Nitro Mountain, it was a music book. It's, you know, country music was the thing that kept me in love with that. This one is water and rivers and music and fishing, and I think it's important to find something like that, like the music or the water of whatever you're working on, something that you love, that's going to pull you back, especially if it's difficult material. That's the tension that I like to maintain. So thank you all for coming out. I'm happy to sign books and talk to you. Really appreciate it. Good to see you. Thank you. I love Oxford so much. Till next time.